Hi, welcome to another edition of This Issue. My guest this time is Bob Klotz from South Portland, who's a climate change activist. Bob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bruce.
Glad to have you here.
Absolutely.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a physician assistant. I've been in healthcare for about 40 years now, and right now working primarily in addiction and psychiatry.
All right. Yeah. You were recently heavily involved in our statewide campaign to stop the General Dynamics corporate welfare bill that requested $60 million from our state. We were able to cut it by 25% down to $45 million, but it did pass in Augusta. Why did you get involved in that effort?
Well, you know, I talked to you recently. I did intend to go back and try to chronologically figure that out, and I honestly don't remember exactly what it was. I know I had, we may give credit to Jackie Deveneaux, maybe one of her email posts or one of her Facebook posts put out the word about this issue, but somewhere along the line it caught my attention, and it caught my attention hard, and I just was really motivated that here, as I said along the way, if we supported the principles of Occupy, if we were opposed to Citizens United, if we are opposed to corporate welfare, here it is right here, and we have the opportunity in the state to do something about it. And I think on some level I figured I would end up at the State House and there would be thousands of like-minded individuals pushing back on this bill. But certainly your communications along the way just inspired me that this was work I have been committed to over time in various forms, but here was a real opportunity.
The amazing thing was that just very recently in Washington, a similar bill, basically a corporate rich person's tax cut bill, passed, and the Democrats, of course, very much opposed it.
Right.
And including here in Maine, many of the Democrats were opposed, most of them, all of them were opposed to that bill in Washington.
Right.
Some people even occupied Senator Susan Collins' office, I remember, and were arrested because they were opposed to that.
Yep.
But then we had, strangely, Democrats in Maine supporting it.
This bill.
This bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, a smaller version for sure, but still the same concept, corporate welfare.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the other one on my list was this so-called tax reform at the end of the year. Well, again, here it is in Maine. We can actually do something about it. And it was shocking to me as well that the Dems were supporting it, co-sponsoring it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, looking back on the effort, share with us some of your other thoughts about the campaign.
Well, I think having been involved in different campaigns, I worked largely in the most recent years with 350 Maine for climate justice issues. And, you know, my one statement, which is not to be critical of anybody, but you know, those meetings oftentimes were dozens of people with flip charts on the walls and markers and hours of planning and some very good results from that kind of attempt at a democratic process and a strategic plan. But this was the most informal, casual, but also incredibly organized campaign I've been on. And you know, my mentor for 350 work was a fellow named David Stember, and he would regularly turn to me and say, are you having fun yet? And I really enjoyed when you turned to me at one point and said, are you having fun? You know, and to say that in the context of this issue, which was really kind of frustrating and maddening at times, but it was exciting and wonderful and actually fun at times to have this very organic, informal, genuine grassroots effort where people showed up without ego, with real creativity and compassion and passion, and we're moving this forward in ways that were really quite remarkable.
And you did something very extraordinary several times. As it turns out, during the middle of the campaign, there was also the Lenten peace vigils that are held at Bath Iron Works all through Lenten season. And so you rode your bicycle from South Portland up to the vigil at least 3 times, right?
4, yeah.
4.
Yeah.
And how long was that ride?
On a good day, it was 3.5 hours. With the headwind, which I hit twice, it was about 4.
Wow.
And for me, I bike commute, and I actually honor a friend in the movement who challenged me when I assumed I had to buy a new expensive car. And he said, you know, we can't keep supporting this system that we have. And it got me thinking, and I had bike commuted periodically through the years and regularly when I was younger. So I bike commute shorter distances to work and so forth. But I think it's important to be in integrity about the things we say and commit to. And I can't bike to everything, but I do what I can. And I certainly can use the exercise. And it just felt like a real opportunity to travel the distance, commit to it as a no carbon thing because of the connection between these challenges with the Bath Iron Works and the military and climate and so forth. And it seemed like people were certainly struck by it, so that was nice as well. But it was a good experience.
We should mention, when it comes to climate change, is that the U.S. military is the largest carbon emitter,
Yes,
the biggest polluter on the planet.
absolutely.
So when we're talking about dealing successfully with climate change, that means we also have to deal with the military. And sadly, a lot of environmental groups that work on climate change don't do that, do they?
Yeah, we've shared the frustration about the disconnect around these various intersections and the intersection between climate change and pollution, and the military is undeniable, but there's a lot of denial out there, as we know, on just climate change itself. But again, I honor that you've done tremendous work. Your Peace Walk each year has given us an opportunity to work together and to really speak to that issue. But yeah, I think we confronted that allergy to things with this bill as well. Is that, again, the room should have been filled. It would have been logical for these so-called liberal progressive groups to be pushing up against this, but it was moving them out of a silo that they weren't comfortable with, which is really unfortunate.
It was always my contention. Disagree if you'd like. Don't dare to, though. No, seriously. Because the bill was largely sponsored by Democrats, I think it froze a lot of the Democratic constituencies across the state, whether they were poor people's campaigns or healthcare campaigns or environmental campaigns, liberal Democrats. But they really got froze because their party leaders were supporting the bill, and they didn't want to go up against their own party leadership.
Well, you and others got a phone call from me. It had gone through the taxation committee, and again, to the credit of you and the campaign, it had been slowed down that they had 4 hearings in the taxation committee about this. And I came out of the 4th one, and I called you and I chatted with others about how I felt like the last vestige of innocence had been kicked out of me, because here we were in this room and the truth was just being suppressed and denied, and these corporate political talking points were just being foisted over and over again. And it just really distressed me that the truth did not appear to be winning, and that people who, again, should have been in those rooms with us, allegedly the Democrats, allegedly these, I would think these liberal groups, were just not there. And it was really disturbing to me that after everything we've been through, that here it was again. But we know history is long in these respects, but it's still quite disappointing.
Yeah. But in spite of that, we did pretty well.
Yeah, quite
under
well.
the circumstances.
Well. Yes, especially under the
we
circumstances.
had one arm tied behind our back.
And the media blackout on top of the rest, all of that.
You also served as my primary medical advisor during my 37-day hunger strike against the bill, which I appreciated very much. Was I ever in any medical danger?
Well, as you know, our approach to it was pretty informal and casual, as the whole campaign was. There's a statement that if Jesus Christ came down and healed the sick, he would be charged with a Class C crime of practicing medicine without a license, and so I wasn't doing that. But I also felt that you were empowered And I was trying to empower you about your own care and your own health, and you were very powerful in that regard. And so I felt like I was more of an informal support and a friend of, here's what I understand the risks to be, and so I think you were in relative risk because you weren't getting a full complement of nutrients, but I think you were approaching it in a very logical, sensible way. 37 days without food, just for me, 37 minutes on a psychological level would be tough. But I thought you were being realistic and honest about it, and you were checking in with me and other support, and I think in a reasonable way. So I ultimately, I think you weathered that quite well, and so I think your risk was low.
Just in case anyone wonders, I did a liquid fast, water, fruit juices, fruit smoothies, and broth.
Yep.
So that was what I did drink during that time.
Yep.
I lost about 18 pounds. I've gained back about half of that. And
And I just want to honor, again, that was an impressive experience as an observer of your commitment there. And, I said to you at the time you announced it, so what is your intent? What do you expect how do you, from your experience and so forth, what is your expectation in terms of affecting people? And I just really was impressed that your response was that wasn't the intent. It was really a spiritual commitment for yourself in many regards.
yeah, I after the first public hearing in Augusta, I came back and I was just going crazy with outrage about these corporate talking points that you well stated. And I told my partner that night that if I didn't do a hunger strike, that I would have a heart attack, that I was so upset.
Right.
And I knew I needed to calm myself down. And from doing other hunger strikes in the past, always in solidarity with others, much shorter, I'd done a couple, 2 weeks at a time, but I knew that I'd get more serene and that would help me through that time. So that was my primary motivation.
Wow.
But also it had a practical organizing effect
Sure.
as well.
Well, quite admirable.
Only a couple media outlets in Maine ever covered the hunger strike, but the real surprise to me was that hardly any media covered the big story during that time, which was that the S6 local union at BIW that represents the most workers at the shipyard, more than 3,500 workers, they held a membership meeting and took a vote on the bill, the corporate welfare bill, LD 1781, and the vote came out 50-50, 50 opposed, 50 in favor. And so the union did not endorse the bill. I would have thought that would have been a huge story.
Right.
Never got reported. What do you think?
Well, in that union piece, when I did talk to one liberal organization organizer, the very first thing they said is you should maybe make contact with the union. Because I think there was this, again, the major talking point that was said and unsaid was jobs, jobs, jobs. And I just think that everybody was just really protective of that. And this would have seemed like a real opportunity to say, the people who have the jobs are kind of challenging us to examine this more deeply. And that was one of many things that was really disappointing around the media thing. As you know, I reached out to Portland Press Herald and Maine Public as well as others asking about this, and the most consistent response I got was defensiveness. They would write back with, well, here's the 4 times we reported it, which were usually very limited, very superficial, no editorial comment. I almost would have liked them to have an editorial comment that they were in support of the bill, just so they took some overt position. But there was just no deep dialogue beyond the bollard. And some of the and obviously all the letters to the editor. So, but it was just sort of interesting that there, again, much like with the taxation committee, there did not seem to be willingness, and there seemed to be significant reluctance to really look at the truth, including where the workers were at with this.
Yeah, it's amazing. Actually, the first day of my hunger strike, which was February 12th, I went to the Union Hall. And I took in my flyer that I was handing out to the workers at noon 3:30 as the shift change would happen.
Yeah.
And I went in just to explain to them that I was going to be out there every day and that I was not opposing the workers in any way. I just wanted them to know and understand what I was doing, that it was about the bill. And one of the guys reached over on his desk and he picked up that copy of the Bollard front page story that said, "Ship of Fools, tax breaks for BIW and World War III for the rest of us." And it just blew my mind because he didn't even have to say anything. It was like, yeah, we get it. We understand what you're talking about here.
Yep.
And I was told later on that one of the workers, I don't know which worker, but one of the workers at the shipyard was so impressed with the Bollard story that he began going all over the yard and talking to other workers and explaining how General Dynamics didn't really need that money. And that what I learned by going out there and talking to workers repeatedly for a couple of weeks during the hunger strike is many of them are still very upset about their last contract, where General Dynamics basically gave them 4 years, the contract, with no pay raises and with give-backs in pension plan and health care plan. So this is one of the major reasons why in the end, the union, S6 union, didn't endorse it because of the way they've been treated by General Dynamics. They have no great love for it, or at least many of the workers don't for the company.
And I just want to say, I think one of the, just to amplify, one of the key strengths of the campaign and of you as an organizer was making it personal. You know, I think in many of the groups I've worked in, there maybe is too much of a tendency to hide behind emails or Facebook posts or sort of, oh, this is effective, but it's impersonal. And I think we get intimidated by canvassing and knocking on our neighbor's door. But you were out there talking to people who, again, many of us would have been reluctant to do, but you were making those personal connections, as well as in the State House. And you know, and there were many others who were trying to make those connections, and I think it made a huge difference.
Let's talk about the State House for a minute. You did a lot of work helping to coordinate people contacting their state legislators. How would you evaluate the performance of the Maine House and Senate on this corporate welfare bill?
Well, in retrospect now, predictably, you know, not really showing up to this. Again, I had this fantasy that despite other evidence that they would see the light and see the truth and respond to the will of the people. But on some level, I keep saying if we had more people in the room, on some level, I think if we had more people in the room, it still would have played the way it did. Again, there's considerations of, you know, where this came from in terms of the leadership and the relationship to BIW and General Dynamics and some of the intimidation factor there. And it's, to my mind, pretty clear that these individual legislators take their marching orders more from their leadership than from the people. And that's very disappointing. But it's also revealed, there's the Center for Public Integrity that's looked at the issue of transparency and ethics and truthfulness in the state legislature of Maine. And at best, we get a C. And when you average, I think it's like 8 different areas, it's an F. We get an F. And for me, that's the tail to this campaign is, as an individual, that we're really kind of wasting our times in many regards unless we speak to that institutional flaw that revealed itself, I think, in this bill.
One night during the campaign, I got a phone call from one state legislator who told me it's all about the corporate lobbies, who in Augusta, they give money to both parties, they give it to the leadership then doles it out to various people. They appoint committee chairs based on subservience to the leadership and to the wants and needs of the corporate lobbies, and that's the way the system works.
Right.
And so really we were up against that as much as anything else.
Yes, entirely.
And in fact, General Dynamics hired, as one of their primary movers of the bill, they hired a lobbyist who used to be a Speaker of the House years ago. And so as I watched this scene, because we were up there a couple days a week standing with signs and between the House and Senate chamber, we saw a lot of things going on. And just watching how this lobbyist moved amongst all the politicians, and they were all buddies, you know, and you just see how the whole thing really works.
Right, right.
Yeah, quite an interesting thing. Well, this growing trend of corporations demanding welfare checks from cash-strapped states like Maine is becoming a real problem nationally. Right now, in Connecticut, is a bill to give General Dynamics $150 million. Same story, you know, they extracted 20-some million out of Rhode Island, which is a very small state. So this kind of thing is happening all over the country every day.
Yep.
So what do you think should be done?
Well, I think we, again, need to accept that this is the reality that we're up against. I actually...
You mean accept it? Like
No, accept it as, you know, the word oligarchy...
maybe recognize.
Well, oligarchy gets thrown around, and as of December with that tax bill, to me, there's like no question that that's the world that we're in, that this is a corporate-run political game. And this reinforced it. I actually was looking back at some early Occupy Maine TV videos, and I was struck by how many times we all said corporate welfare back then. I'd almost forgotten, I mean, it's fundamental to the Occupy principle, but I almost felt like with this bill, I was saying it for the first time, and it's just saying it over and over again. I think it's worse by some degree, and I think that if we can help people to accept and recognize it as a reality, but not accept it, to really step up to this is the country that we have, despite the Kool-Aid that many of us are given. This is a corporate political game that puts all of us at risk.
Let's move on to a current subject, a little bit related to what we're talking about, is Syria. As we sit here, today is April 10th. Our president, Donald Trump, is threatening to attack Syria, and the USS Donald Cook, a Aegis destroyer outfitted with cruise missiles, is now steaming towards the Russian Navy base in Syria. And many people believe that there will soon be an attack of some kind because Trump has been threatening it for the last 48 hours or so. It's really very frightening because what we are seeing is our country, number one, trying to topple an elected government of Syria, accusing it with offering no evidence whatsoever of gassing its own people. And in fact, we know that several years ago, Syria got rid of all of their chemical weapons, and that they and Russia have been fighting ISIS, which the United States says we are doing, but doesn't seem like we never get anywhere doing it. But the Russians and the Syrians have now pretty much defeated ISIS in Syria. So just as the moment where the last stronghold of ISIS fighters in Syria had been captured by the Syrian government, then this incident again happens, this chemical weapons incident, which the United States then uses as a pretext. Okay, we've got to go in there and punish these people. And hypocritically, what I hear is nobody saying anything about all the children that we know are being killed and they're dying from diseases, from starvation in Yemen, where the United States is helping Saudi Arabia, the head-chopping regime of Saudi Arabia. We're helping them fight that war in Yemen, and the United States doesn't see anything wrong with that at all. It's total hypocrisy. You have any comment on that?
Well, again, I turn to people like you who have been relentless through years and decades about this issue. I mean, I've been anti-war since a very young man, protesting down in Washington, D.C. I don't know to what gain when you look at what we're up against, but it's incredibly despairing to be so cynical about our government in terms of what they clearly are up to and might be up to, and that we've experienced, for decades back, well before, but including Vietnam and the Gulf War and all of that. And so I think we have to assume that that's the risk here again, and then it's with a public that seems to be pretty passive about all this, what can actually be done? And that's when, again, I turn to you to say, help us to move this forward.
You know, it's like deja vu all over again. 2003, shock and awe in Iraq.
Yep.
You know, George Bush saying that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and they didn't.
Right.
And it's the same kind of program over and over and over again. Same thing, whether it was Libya, whether it was Iraq, or now in Syria, it's the same story repeatedly.
Right.
We have 1 minute left.
Okay.
How about a closing comment on anything you'd like to say?
Well, again, I found this work that I've done with you over the last number of years on a number of different levels. I'm just honored by the ability to work with you on it, and I really am grateful to have grown our friendship over the years. It was a potluck on State Street in Portland from a peace walk a couple of years ago that I got to invite you to come and stay over the house, and you and Mary Beth are always welcome. And it's just, you know, I think you're doing incredible work, and I'm really pleased to have connected more this time around.
And
with
thank you for all the incredible work you've done in this recent months. The people of Maine should know that this guy was huge in saving this state $15 million from this corporate welfare
I'll take
bill
a percent
for
of
General
that.
Dynamics. You were big. Thank
Well,
you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Bruce.
All right. And thank you for watching another edition of This Issue. Until next time, good luck to you all, and please, now more than ever, get organized.